Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, John and Lee proudly present the greatest wrestling show ever!
Right, guys, welcome to episode 12 of the greatest wrestling show ever. We're nearing the end of the card now, and we're taking a 33-and-a-half-year rewind to a classic match that many, particularly for the put forth as being one of the greatest matches ever. We're going to get straight into it, and I've got a few little things to tell you, Lee, that you might be interested in. I've just abstained from telling you before we got on. So at the start of, it's 2 chapters before the match, WrestleMania 3. It's 1 hour 43:01. It's the Randy Savage promo, which is then followed by the Ricky Steamboat promo, and then followed by the match itself, because the match isn't mega long, so I thought we'd do these as well. 1 hour 43:01. Pressing play in 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so Macho Man Randy Savage there is holding the Intercontinental title. So 2 interesting things for you. The second one is about the Intercontinental title itself, which I'll come to in a minute. The first one, which I was dying to send you a message about the other day, but I thought I'd save it for the podcast, is you see the background that I've got up now?
Yes.
If obviously anyone else, I've got a virtual background because I'm just down in my cellar, and it's the greatest wrestling show ever logo or whatever you call it, based on the greatest wrestling match ever from Backlash this year between Edge and Randy Orton. I've just changed Edge's face to be Lee's and Randy Orton's to be mine. And on Saturday night, I was on a virtual cheese and wine evening with the NCT parents. So my wife and I, Alex, my wife and I were on with 4 other couples that we know. On my Zooms, they'd all logged on to my Zoom because I've got the paid version. It lasts forever rather than cutting off after 45 minutes. And all of a sudden, halfway through the NCT get-together, the cheese and wine thing, for no apparent reason, my virtual background turned on, and it was that picture. So quickly, I was like, I probably should explain why there's a picture of 2 half-naked men.
So you have to get the story then.
They all laughed, and I was tempted to message you at the time, but I thought I'll save that for the podcast. So Randy Savage has already made his way to the ring now. I'm surprised he got down that quick, because wasn't WrestleMania 3, wasn't the ring an awful long way from the back, and they got brought down on carts, which I think was possibly put in place for the likes of Andre and King Kong Bundy, who couldn't actually walk that far.
Yeah, same, wasn't it?
Say again, sorry, mate, you're breaking up.
WrestleMania 6 was the same.
It was, yeah. They were tiny little mini ring carts, weren't they, designed to look like a wrestling ring. One of my main memories of watching this 25 or more years ago is Andre coming down in the ring cart thing.
Yeah.
Interviewing Ricky Steamboat. Ricky Steamboat can't speak properly today. He looks angry, doesn't he?
So where do you rank?
Say again, mate.
Where do you rank the match yourself in terms of, is it in your top 10?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to fast forward it to the modern day, I don't know if it'd be considered one of the greatest matches of all time, put into the modern context. Definitely at its point in time, it was streets ahead of a lot of other stuff, and I can completely see why it was held in such high regard. And I think part of the fact that it's been so well remembered was the fact that it was so far above most of what you saw, and was between 2 well-known, well-liked performers at the time. To leave it in its original context, because that's the only way you can fairly do it, then yeah, I think it's safe to say put it in one of the top 10 of all time.
Macho Man didn't have bad matches, did he?
He didn't know, and it's my understanding that he was one of the very first wrestlers to choreograph a high proportion of the match. So back in the 80s, and then really for many years afterwards, most wrestlers might have a few key parts of the match planned out. So they might discuss beforehand the start, a couple of spots in the middle, and the finish, and then they would essentially ad-lib the rest as they went along. Nowadays, it's 99.9% all planned out, which I get is obviously in major part down to the fact that everything now is kept for posterity. You know, you can't do the same match in each town on a loop because everything you do nowadays is on TV. So I get that. But I understand that Randy Savage was one of the first people to plan high proportions of the match, and this match particularly, he wrote out weeks and weeks in advance and gave Ricky Steamboat a copy, numbering all the moves. So he'd shout out to him when you see him in catering, say a few weeks before, move 27, and Ricky Steamboat would have to shout back what that was.
Wow.
Yeah, one of the very early examples of that. Which, I don't know, does it take away anything from it, or it's still the same match, isn't it? Still the same performance?
Impressive. Because
Which,
a lot of the time, with a lot of matches, you can spot quite easily the choreography. But I think in this match, I don't know, it's very natural for me.
I never really liked the word choreography. Like, I mean, it's better than fake, I suppose. Fake's quite dismissive of it. With choreography, I mean, with the modern wrestling, even then, I don't think it's necessarily quite the right word, but particularly back in the 80s and 90s, and even really when I was wrestling as well, I would never describe what I did as choreographed. It might have been pre-planned to a degree. It might have been, I don't know, to me, choreographed is something that you sort of you plan out completely and you practice and you rehearse. Like, I've never rehearsed a match in my entire life. I might have had an idea of some of the stuff I was going to do in it, but I would never describe it as choreographed. But that's by the by anyway. So they had a quick start there, a couple of exchanges of arm drags. Ricky got Randy Savage up into like a standing choke and threw him down in his roll to the outside of the ring. Macho Man wearing pink trunks there. I completely forgotten about his pink trunks because that's not the colour he's most well known for wearing, is it?
Would matches have been rehearsed?
The odd one would have been. I think in the majority of cases, particularly back in the 80s and 90s, like I said, most would have had a conversation where they'd agreed a few spots and they may have wrestled each other before and be familiar with each other's work, but the majority of it would be called in the ring. So you'd send someone off and say duck, duck, clothesline, whatever it would be in the match, and you may have done the sequence of spots before, so you kind of know what was coming. But in terms of two wrestlers getting in the ring beforehand to practice a match, even now, I don't know how much that happens, but back then I'd say that was practically unheard of. Right, so my other interesting thing for you, Lee, is over the weekend, again, I was tempted to message you at the time, I came across something called it's a linear history of various wrestling titles. So, you know, in boxing, you've got a linear champion,
Yeah.
essentially, and it's not necessarily who the recognised world champion is. People have worked out the linear champions for various different titles based on a number of rules. And from that, I'm going to give you a few clues because it's really, really hard to get the answer. I'm going to ask you to guess who the linear intercontinental champion is. So, the rules are the champion will defend his title in every 1-versus-1 encounter. So, any non-title matches that have occurred and the champion lost, the title changed hands in essence. Champion cannot lose his title in multi-man matches, can't be lost in body slam challenges, arm wrestling contests, can't be lost by DQ or count out, etc. It's just if the champion had a 1v1 match and was pinned or submitted by his opponent, the title essentially changed hands. Now, in order to work out who the Intercontinental Champion is, a few little pointers for you. According to this, if that had actually happened, the Intercontinental Championship was unified with the WWF Championship when Bob Backlund beat initial champion Pat Patterson. The lineage of the titles would have then stayed together, so Bob Backlund would have been both, the Iron Sheik would have been both, Hogan would have been both, etc. Meaning the next time it came back to the original timeline was when Rick Rude in WCW in 1994, of all people, would have been the linear intercontinental and world champion, and when he retired it would have been vacated and returned to the actual intercontinental champion, which was Jeff Jarrett at the time. It would have then again got unified and been alongside the WWF title in WWF right through to Edge retiring in 2011, when it would have shifted to the actual Intercontinental Champion of the time, The Big Show. So from 2011 onwards, it restarts the original timeline, then gets reunified with the world title. So ultimately, the question really is based on a linear following of if a champion loses, Who? You'll never guess. You need more of a clue. Okay, it goes through joining and rejoining a real timeline. So in SummerSlam 2018, Roman Reigns defeats Brock Lesnar for it, which genuinely happened. Shane McMahon then beats Roman Reigns, which he did in a non-title match. So he's the champion. Where your biggest clue is on August the 20th this year, linear world champion Kevin Owens and Intercontinental champion is defeated by Elias, who is the 24/7 champion. That means the Intercontinental, World, and 24/7 titles are unified. So, based on that, who is the linear 24/7 and Intercontinental and World Heavyweight Champion?
The R-Truth.
It's Carmella. It was R-Truth before Carmella. So R-Truth defeated EC3 on September the 21st at WWE live event. And then Carmella beat Truth on the 23rd of September on Raw. In reality, only claiming the 24/7 title. In fact, maybe she didn't even claim the title. I don't actually know that, but she definitely beat him on that Raw. And if it had all followed a linear thing, she would now be the unified 24/7 Intercontinental, and I think pretty much everything else champion.
Oh wow, that's pull that together.
I'll send you the link. It's a really interesting read because at some points in the past, titles swap companies. So the WWF title ends up in WCW because Bob Backlund lost it to Antonio Inoki, who eventually loses to somebody who loses to somebody who loses to Rick Rude. And the WCW title at the same time is in WWF because in 1991, as you know, Ric Flair takes the title to WWF. He loses a house show to Hogan, and almost the timelines of the two titles have been swapped over there, amazingly.
Incredible.
I'll send you the link anyway. It's an interesting read. We've completely digressed there anyway. So Ricky Steamboat has been sent to the outside. George the Animal Steel, who, if you didn't know in reality, was a school teacher, is helping Ricky back into the ring. Yeah.
Questions? All right. Do you know who Ricky the Dragon Steamboat fought at WrestleMania 1?
Matt Bourne, the original Doink.
Well done.
Yes.
I don't think you'd get that.
Easy. So before it became Doink, Matt Bourne was considered something of a tough guy. He was the son of Tough Tony Bourne, a wrestler from, I don't know, maybe like the 50s, 60s, something like that, and was considered a genuine tough guy. And unfortunately, his lasting legacy is Doink.
Do you know who gave Randy Savage his nickname, Macho Man?
Ooh, I believe I do, but it's not coming to mind now. No, pass.
It was his mum.
Okay, right. I didn't actually know that. Okay, what was the story behind that?
It was she read it in Reader's Digest that nobody knew what a Macho Man was.
Right.
But she Reader's Digest that it was going to be a hot term in coming years. So she sent that and a few other suggestions in a letter to Randy.
Right.
And suggested that's what it should go by.
Because there was a song from the 80s going, Macho, Macho Man. Was that after that then, presumably, was it?
Yeah. It was Ole Anderson that came up with the Savage part of his name because his grappling style was ferocious.
It's a funny name, Randy Savage, because obviously it's an actual name in America. Randy is a first name and Savage can be a surname. But Randy Savage sounds a bit more like maybe like a George the Animal Steel type character, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like a horny half man, half ape type character.
No. He does look like a Randy Savage, doesn't he, the way he's looking at Elizabeth?
Yeah. To be honest, I think we all look a bit like a Randy Savage when we look at Miss Elizabeth, don't we? Do you know what happened to Miss Elizabeth? Yeah, she did. She was going out with Lex Luger and died of an overdose in about, I think it was around about the same time that Chris Benoit and Sherry died. I think within like a week or two of each other. I think Sherry was the same weekend as Chris Benoit, and that's why it was not so well reported. But I think Elizabeth was only a couple of weeks before or after. Okay, just looking in my 100 greatest matches of all time book. The foreword is by Ricky Steamboat, and I might come back to that in a minute. But then the first match mentioned in there is this match, the Intercontinental Championship match from WrestleMania 3. The lead-up: sports entertainment matches often fall into two major categories: competitors looking to win a championship or competitors settling a personal grudge. The match between Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Macho Man Randy Savage at WrestleMania 3 can easily fit into both categories. A few months earlier, when challenging Savage for the Intercontinental Championship, Steamboat found himself facing a potential career-ending injury. Draped over a guardrail outside the ring, Steamboat's larynx was driven into the rail by a Macho Man elbow off the top rope. Some may have thought it was an accident until Savage looked to finish the job by driving the ring bell into Steamboat's throat. He dropped an elbow off the top, didn't he, holding onto the ring bell, if I remember correctly. The diagnosis was a crushed larynx, and many questioned if he'd ever wrestle again. But Steamboat's will and heart were not to be denied, and the Dragon returned looking for revenge against Savage, as well as another shot at the Intercontinental Championship. So did you watch this at the time? You didn't have Sky, did you? Were you aware of WrestleMania?
I didn't watch, first time I watched this on VHS.
I had the WrestleMania 3 VHS as well.
Yeah, because I kind of got into wrestling probably around about WrestleMania 5 time, well, that year anyway, what, 88. And then obviously I went back, the local video shop had them all on video.
I had exactly the same video shop on the marketplace in Ashbourne. I used to go and get them for like £2.50 for 2 days or something like that.
4 was a double video, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember that well. What other matches do you remember from this show? There was King Kong Bundy and a couple of midgets against Hillbilly Jim and a couple of midgets, and then King Kong Bundy attacks, was it Little Beaver at the end or something like that?
Yeah, it's obviously the Hulk Andre match.
Yeah. So what would you say, so this is an Al Snow, if you know who he is, question. What would you say is the best match at WrestleMania 3?
The one that we're watching now.
So if you went to an Al Snow training seminar, he would tell you that the best match at WrestleMania 3 was Hulk versus Andre, because the best match is the one that draws the most money. And whilst I'd see his point, it was a really shit match.
Yeah, that's not.
Andre, by that point, was barely mobile, and the majority of the match alternated between him choking Hogan with his singlet, headbutting him, and then back to choke, singlet choke, headbutt, and so on.
So the book that you are they ranked, or is it just?
No, they're not. They're just 100 different matches. Yeah, so this is the first one, but it's not particularly ranked as being number one. I think this is the one as well that a lot of wrestlers. The last one is also Randy Savage. It's the Ultimate Warrior versus Macho King Randy Savage from WrestleMania 10. Interestingly, he bookends the book. Do you know what?
Warrior v WrestleMania 7.
Yeah.
Was that the career-ending one?
It was, yeah.
How many times did Savage drop the elbow from the top rope?
I'm going to say 3.
5.
5. Wow.
I guess we're all to the answer.
3 is often the number. 3 is a nice round number that works quite well. Speaking of dropping the elbow,
thing because he kept dropping them, and Warrior kept jumping out, and
didn't at the end of that match there. So Warrior made his comeback and then pinned Savage just with his foot in his chest, didn't he?
Yeah.
It's made him look like a bit of a chump, really. Like, you hit your finisher 5 times.
I was surprised that Savage allowed that.
It's always interesting with things like that. Like, yeah, when they happen and you sort of question the thought process behind it. Like, obviously, they want to make Warrior strong, but you can make him strong just by pinning him without your opponent looking like a chump.
And then Sherry. No.
Yeah. So WrestleMania 3 had for many years the record attendance for both wrestling and indoor events in North America. Now the recorded attendance was 93,000. In reality, supposedly it was 78. Do you want to know what wrestling show then took the record off that? I think this is the finish, isn't it? This is the finish already.
Yeah.
Slam, roll up. Yeah. Yet again, we've spoken very little about the actual match. But okay, so
WrestleMania, wasn't it?
And which WrestleMania?
A relatively recent one.
That's the one that took the kayfabe record. So WrestleMania 32 in 2016, headlined by Triple H defending against Roman Reigns, had a recorded crowd of 101,000. And in reality, it was in the 90s, which means that is the biggest North American attendance. But in reality, there was another show. I'll give you a clue. 1992 by WWF, as was, that drew 80 something thousand, beating the legit 78 from WrestleMania 3.
On WrestleMania 8.
SummerSlam 92, Wembley.
Oh, Wembley. Oh,
So seemingly for that Wembley SummerSlam 92, the attendance
well, no,
was.
hang on. Wembley's outdoors.
It was still in attendance, isn't it?
Well, no, the record that this broke was the indoor attendance.
Right, you're correct. Sorry. Okay, so the record then that broke was for a wrestling show. Sorry. So the indoor attendance record would have, and that's the indoor attendance record in North America actually. So that obviously wouldn't have been broken by SummerSlam, but the record attendance for a wrestling show. Prior to this, I believe it had been in Texas. I think a couple of years earlier, one of the WCCW shows, headlined, I think, by Kerry Von Erich versus Ric Flair, drew over 50,000. I think that was the record, the genuine, legit record, until WrestleMania 3 here beats it with a legit 78,000. But then SummerSlam 92 for many years has the record with a legit 80-something thousand. The all-time record for a wrestling show attendance, any ideas? Again, it's tricky if you don't know it. It's 1995 and it's WCW.
I guess it's around 110, isn't it?
It's called Collision in Korea. It was a super show organised by Antonio Inoki of New Japan Pro Wrestling in conjunction with WCW, sent over Ric Flair and a number of others to appear on it. It was held in Korea, and I think you had to go or you were executed. I think that was how it worked. And I believe it was 2 days, and I think day one drew 150,000 and day two drew 170,000.
Wow.
So they're the records realistically that will never be beaten, you would assume.
Sensational. Good here.
Say again, sorry?
The sensational show isn't looking too good here.
For those listening at home, it's now recapping the Jake the Snake versus Honky Tonk match, and with Jake the Snake is Alice Cooper, who, as you said, bears a vague resemblance to Sherry, but that's hardly a compliment, is it? Right, it was a good match, that. Just to give you then the aftermath of the Steamboat Savage match. Savage attempted to regain the title from Steamboat, but was not successful. However, the Dragon did not keep the championship long. Just 2.5 months later, Steamboat fell to Honky Tonk Man, who held the title for an amazing 454 days. Even though Macho Man did not hold the Intercontinental Championship again, he was just 1 year away from his most impressive feat. Savage won 4 matches at WrestleMania 4 to capture the WWE Championship in a 14-man tournament. Do you know why Steamboat dropped the Intercontinental title so quickly after WrestleMania 3? He asked for some time off to spend some time with his family because his son Richie had just been born, and Vince was furious about that, so he gave him the time off and then some, but having dropped the title. You've gone completely silent.
Really?
Yeah, me now.
I say I think that's fair enough for Vince. I mean,
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I don't know how much time he asked off for. If he asked off for a day, then it does seem a bit of an overreaction. If he asked for a month off, maybe. Right. Okay. So next week, are we saying now? When I was messaging you earlier, you and your Matt Hardy obsession wanted to put TLC in today. You wanted to talk about Matt Hardy 3 weeks in a row, but I reminded you at the end of last week's episode we'd agreed on Steamboat Savage. So we're saying TLC, and then Bret Austin, and then Cena
and Punk. Yeah.
Sounds like a plan. Cool, right, guys. Anyone listening at home, hope you enjoyed that. As always, comment on anything on Facebook. Let us know. We know people are listening because we can see the download figures. It'd be nice to hear a bit back from some of you guys. Recommend it to your friends. Tag anyone you know who's interested in wrestling and/or podcasts, which is quite a lot of people who like one of those two things, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Tag them and let them know.